Have you been thinking about buying a house in Arizona's West Valley? Cities like Buckeye, Goodyear, Peoria, Surprise. With all the new construction happening and all the new build incentives, it might seem like the perfect time for you to make your move. But before you start searching best cities to live in Arizona, or before you get swept up by all the new build incentives, I want to share a few buyer mistakes I see people doing over and over again. Mistakes that can leave you stuck or maybe even regretting making that move. See, here's a problem. Interest rates have gone up from like the mid twos all the way to the sevens or mid sevens. I've even seen interest rates as high as 8%. And builders in cities like Buckeye and Goodyear, they've been getting very creative to make sure they move their inventory. So I've seen 2-1 buy downs with rates as low as 1.99 for the first year. I've seen 3.99 fixed for 30 years, conventional 4.99. Special offers in new construction. I've seen master plans pop up everywhere in the West Valley. But what most Arizona home buyers don't realize is that when you decide to sell, you're not just competing against your neighbor. You're competing against some of these home builders, which can offer bigger credits, lower interest rates, and different kind of incentives that you cannot offer. So if you're searching, should I buy in Arizona in 2025 or 2025 home buyer regrets, you need to know what's really happening behind the scenes. So stick with me because in this video, I'm gonna break down which cities in the West Valley, like for example, Surprise, Buckeye, Goodyear, Peoria, could put you at a disadvantage when you decide to sell. And I'll give you the smartest tips to avoid costly mistakes in the Arizona market for 2025. Hey, what's up guys? I'm Juan Ramirez, #1 realtor here in Arizona and your real estate consultant. And I help home buyers and sellers avoid common and expensive mistakes in the Arizona real estate market. All right guys, so let's start by looking at why these builder incentives, also the record amount of permits being pulled by a lot of these master plan communities can affect your home future value. And first off, we have Surprise. Now, Surprise, I would say, is one of those cities that you don't really expect to fall in love until you actually visit it. It's a mix of family-friendly communities, parks, spring training, mountain views. It's also near the 303, so getting around's pretty easy. It's growing really fast. It's a great city if you want a pretty big house for a good price. And there's also a lot of job growth because of 303. There's a lot of factories being built, a lot of transportation facilities. So job growth is expected to grow in that area. All right, so in the first 5 months of 2024, there was around 295 permits being pulled for 2 different communities in Surprise. Asante with 182 and Desert Oasis at Surprise with 113. So second on the list is Buckeye, Arizona. So this is a great city to look at if you're looking for more space, newer homes, without being super far away from Phoenix. It's growing pretty fast, but it still feels like a small town. It has great mountain views, a lot of outdoor stuff to do. And if you're trying to get a good bang for your buck, that's the city to look at. All right, in the first 5 months of 2024, they had around 253 permits pulled for a lot of the communities, and most of them are near the I-10, so a very convenient area. So if you have to sell your house, you're going to be competing against some of these cities that are closer to the freeway. Third on the list is Goodyear, Arizona, and this city is a mix of comfort with convenience. Okay, so it's growing really fast, but it still feels pretty laid back. Now you have the 303 and the I-10 really nearby, so the commutes are not really bad, and has tons of shopping, great schools, spring training, and whether you're into hiking or you just want a clean and quiet place to call home, Goodyear's a great place to look at. Just a little bit of everything without feeling too busy. And in the first 5 months of 2024, they had around 151 permits pulled for the community of El Cedro or El Cedro, whichever you prefer. All right, guys, so drum roll. I saved the best for last. I'm just kidding. They're all beautiful cities, but Peoria, it's one of those cities where I think it's a little bit different than the rest. So I wanted to keep it to last because I feel like I want to really break down. I would say South Peoria, which is south of the 101. It's more of a suburban feel without being too far away from Phoenix. So if you work in Phoenix or Scottsdale, your commute's not going to be that bad compared to some of the other cities we have on the list. And South Peoria has a good mix of very established neighborhoods while having still new built communities here and there. So Peoria has a good mix of everything you might want. So you have P83, which has tons of restaurants, a lot of shopping. Right across the street from that on 83rd Avenue and Bell Road, you have Arrowhead Mall. So again, shopping. And if you go north, you got to go to Lake Pleasant if you like to be more of an outdoorsy type of person. Now, again, I wanted to break down Peoria a little bit more because from all the cities that I discussed, Peoria had the most amount of permits being pulled, but that was for North Peoria. And the reason North Peoria has so much growth happening is because of the semiconductor facility that is being built right now. So it's generating tons of job growth. You'll also have the 303 nearby that has a lot of the facilities that are being built by the 303. I think a lot of people are, there's a lot of demand in that area. And the master plan community that is doing a lot of this construction is Oliverita. It's a community that pulled around 258 permits last year on the first 5 months. Now I would say Northern Peoria is also very different based off prices. In Southern Peoria, you're gonna have, or South Peoria, you're gonna have a lot of ranches. You're gonna have starter homes. You're gonna have your standard 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom home. And in Northern Peoria, according to Realtor.com, the average price for a 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom home is around $699,000. So I would say it's a little bit of a more of an expensive community up north. So that's why I feel like it's very different. So when it comes to Peoria, you have to kind of look at it as Northern and in South Peoria when you want to look at which option would be a better one to buy if you might sell soon or if you're deciding to sell way out into the future. All right, guys. So now that we've discussed all the cities, what they have to offer and which ones have had more permits being pulled, which would be more of competition if you decide to sell here in the near future. Now I'm going to go over some tips on things you might want to consider before you choose which city you're going to buy or which community or which area in those cities you're going to decide to buy your next home. All right, so the first thing I want you to consider is time frame. I feel like a lot of people, when they buy in some of these communities, they don't understand that it could take 5 to 10 years for a lot of these master plan communities to be completely built out and sold out. You have to understand that these builders have no emotional attachment to these houses. It's just a business. They need to move inventory. So if they have to do bigger incentives, lower rates, or even do price discounts, which we see when there's a contract that gets canceled when it's about to be completed. So they're just trying to move inventory and they will drop the price to get it out there. And if it gets listed in the MLS, it becomes a comp in your community, which could affect your price and make it a little bit harder for you to compete with them. And we also don't know how long these rates are going to stay this high, or if how long these builders are going to be allowed to continue to offer 1.99, 3.99, or 4.99 rates. And that's going to hurt you when you go to compete because you're not going to be able to offer these super low rates. When you are reselling your house, you're maxed at 3 points that you can contribute towards buying down the interest rate. And the builders are not limited. Some of these builders, I've heard of them paying up to $50,000 in incentives just to give somebody a super low rate. From what I've seen, some of my clients has been around $25,000, which is a lot of money. And a lot of times it goes past the points which the average person is limited to. So just keep that in mind. So the next thing is, should I buy a resale home? Now, a resale home is a house that was purchased from a builder and now it's getting sold to the public or getting resold in the MLS. Or you can also buy a new build, and obviously a new build, you're buying it brand new. And those, back in the days, it wasn't really big of a difference, but now with builders offering such huge incentives, there is a huge difference. And a lot of times houses that are for resale, they're going based off comps in the area. So they're not really making a huge price adjustment compared to new builds. And that's why new builds have huge demand right now. So for example, I have a scenario here, I'll put it right here on the side, where if you buy a house for $450,000 from, let's say, a builder, and they offer 3.99 interest rate, and you want to get something comparable when it comes to the payment. So let's say you go to the resale market and you're trying to find something that is going to give you the same kind of payment. Comparing a 3.99 interest rate on a purchase or a loan of $450,000, you would have to buy, so let's say you got interest rate of 7.25, which as of right now is probably a little bit lower, but let's just use that scenario. 7.25, you would have to buy a resale home for $314,500. That's a huge discount. That's a huge difference. I mean, it's not even comparable. Like, you're not gonna find a 4-bedroom, 2-bath home from a builder, and then you're gonna find a resale home, same size, same everything, but let's say $30,000 less. You're just not gonna find it. So those are the things that you have to consider when buying a house, how much your payment's gonna be. And honestly, I feel like a lot of people don't really consider both options to see which one's going to give you the better benefit. Now, the next thing to consider is the cost of selling your house, which I don't think a lot of people really think about it because they feel like it's way out in the future. But let's say you decide to sell your house. There's going to be cost of listing or hiring a listing agent. The person that brings a buyer's agent might not be the same agent. So now they're going to be negotiating and asking for commission on the buyer's agent. Right now, the way the market is, a lot of buyers are asking for at least $10,000 in concessions. That gives them enough to cover all their closing costs and also gives them a little bit to buy down the rate. So I would say the cost of selling your house is around 5 to 9% of the listing price. Now, let's say when you're ready to sell your house, you don't have enough equity to cover all that cost, then that's gonna have to come out of your pocket. Now, the next thing is to make sure this is a right neighborhood for you. Now, I get it. A lot of times we drive pretty far out because, we're trying to get a specific type of house and we just can't afford that in Goodyear, or some of the cities are closer to Phoenix, so we have to go all the way to Buckeye. Now, the worst thing that can happen is you buy all the way out there and then you decide, hey, you know what, I just can't really deal with this. These are some of the things you might want to consider, and you definitely have to do when you're looking at a specific neighborhood or a specific city that you might buy in. Now, one of the things that I always recommend to do is, especially if you're going to drive really far out and your work's, let's say it's in Phoenix, drive from that city during your regular commute and just see how long it's going to take you to get to your job. And then also in the afternoon when you're supposed to be driving back home, then drive that commute and see how long it takes you to get back to that city or that community that you've decided to buy in. Because if it's going to take you an hour and a half every day and you just realize, hey, you know what, I just can't really deal with this, at least you did it before you got into a contract or before you even bought the house. The next thing is I always recommend people drive through that community on the weekends and also at night, just to see if it's that quiet, nice and peaceful community that you notice at 11 a.m. or does it, are people partying outside or people being loud? So you just want to make sure that the community is what you think it is. And the last one that I recommend is make a list of things that are very important to you or locations that you normally visit that are very important to you, like church, family, restaurants, specific schools that your kids need to go to, and also getting your job. Just consider how long the commute is and can you deal with having to drive that far every day or every other day. I had a client that moved all the way to Maricopa just because at that time that's what they could afford, that's what they were looking for, but then they realized that they were having to drive 2 hours every time they wanted to visit their parents, also 2 hours to go to church on Sundays, and eventually they were almost forced to sell because they just couldn't deal with it anymore. Luckily we had equity, so they didn't have to deal with having to pay for some of those additional costs, but still it was a very stressful situation and there was a lot of competition around. Now, the last tip is for people that buy through a new build and then get an FHA or maybe qualify for a VA loan. If you get a 3.99% from a new build with an FHA or VA loan, these two loans have clauses that allows it to be assumable, and you can offer that option when it comes to listing your house. It makes it a lot more marketable, makes it more competitive if you're competing against builders or even your neighbors that don't know about that option. So let's say you got a 3.99 interest rate a couple years ago and rates are still high, let's say 3 years from now. Now you can offer the 3.99 that was given to you by the builder and they can assume it. Now it is a pretty complicated process, I would say. It takes longer than a regular purchase. I just did one and it took around 3 months, but my clients got a 3.7% on a house that was built since 2019. So it was an amazing deal for them. Also, because you've been paying on that mortgage for a couple years, a lot of the upfront interest rates have been paid up and your client's payment goes more towards principal. So there's a lot of benefits that you want to offer. And again, it makes your house more marketable. Now, the last couple of years, we had a lot of loan officers and a lot of realtors that were saying, I don't know if you heard the phrase, date the rate, marry the house. Well, guess what? The rate's been cheating on you and it hasn't gone down. And we don't know if it's going to go down. What if in the next 3 to 5 years it's still in the 7s or 6? I mean, that's still a pretty high interest rate for some of the prices now. But let's say you buy a 3.99 or a house with a 3.99 interest rate, you can offer that 3.99 as a assumable mortgage. And again, you get the benefit that you've already been paying on it for a couple years. All right. So in conclusion, what I'm saying is that these cities have a lot to offer. They're amazing. They have beautiful communities, but I just want you to have the right expectations and know these tips. So if for some reason you have to sell in the near future, you know what to do. Also, if you're buying, you have to look at all your options. You have to look at resale, you have to look at new builds. Each new build has also different incentives, so it can throw you off a little bit if it's not something you do every day. So if you buy in any of these cities, you have to work with a realtor that is very familiar with these cities and will all do all that research and break it down for you. I've negotiated price drops. I've been able to get appliances from my clients, been able to get bigger credits to buy down the rate when their credit wasn't as where it was supposed to be. And these are things that as a buyer, I mean, you might think you can't negotiate, but because we do it all the time, or at least I do it all the time, I'm able to get all these things from my client. So if you're thinking about buying, please click on the link below to schedule a 30-minute Zoom call with me. This is Juan Ramirez, #1 realtor here in Arizona, and I make real estate moves make sense. See you on the next one.